Erica and Sharon are sisters who began their grief journey in 2006 when Erica's 10-year-old son Austin drowned. Together, they participated in a grief education program, were so moved by this experience, they studied and became specialists so they could help the brokenhearted find recovery. In 2015, tragedy struck their family once again when Erica's oldest son Donovan was killed in a motorcycle accident. Erica and Sharon are committed to sharing their experiences of love, loss, and healing through this podcast. Now your grief specialists, Sharon and Erica.
Hi, friends. Welcome back. You are listening to Healing Starts with the Heart. It's a podcast where it's all about your broken heart, grieving, and everything that we help you with to teach you to move beyond a broken heart. If you're listening to this program today, there's a huge probability that your heart may be broken. It could be from a grief, either recent or long ago, or it could be from one of the 40 or more known losses that we know can cause a brokenness or a loss in your heart. We're not going to tell you how you feel because you already feel. At best, we can tell you that we absolutely know what it felt like when our broken heart occurred. This is a show where we help grievers understand what grieving is all about. My name is Sharon Brubaker. My co-host, who is not here today, is Erica Honore, my sister, and you will see her in other podcasts. We love sharing our time together with you. But today, we're having our very first guest, and I'm so honored to have Christy Porter here with me.
Hello.
Hey, Christy. Thank you, and welcome for doing this. Thank you so much. This is so awesome because you get to share your experience with all of our friends and tell them what it was like. Okay. I think a lot of times when people want to come to grief recovery, they get a little nervous. They get a little nervous and they're not sure what they're going to encounter. And that's the biggest thing that I want for you to share with our guests today. So tell us a little bit or as much as you like about what actually brought you to grief recovery.
I was watching, you were doing the
Radio show.
Radio show, yes. You were doing the radio show, and I was watching them live all the time. And I was just hearing your guest on there, and I'm like, those are things I relate to. And I was relating to a lot of your guests and like their pain, and I was just seeing, and like some of them I actually knew, and just watching how like they just like they're healing.
Their recovery.
Their recovery, and they felt like, and watching like just the weight off of their shoulders and just like their hearts like feeling lighter versus when they first got their heart broken. So I was like, I knew there was something that I was grieving. I couldn't figure out what it was.
Right.
But once I started doing my own grieving, I was like, it really lifted up.
And you know what I love about your story is that a lot of people think they only come to grief recovery because someone has died or they have a death in their past. But that's not what brought you to grief recovery.
No.
You literally heard other grievers sharing their story, and you're like, that's me. I got to go see what it's about. And so you came into the office, and tell about that first day. Was it nervous? Were you nervous?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I was a little bit. Just I didn't know what I was going to be what to expect. I didn't know. And then I did it with a group. And so the group that I did it with, I think I knew maybe one person in the group.
Right.
And so it was just kind of like, okay, how much am I supposed to share? Like, so it was just, but once we got in, like the second week, it was just kind of like we became like family.
And that is so cool, and I'm so glad you shared that. So here's the deal. You can do grief recovery one-on-one, or you can do grief recovery in a group. I personally love the group. Something happens with the group, right?
Yeah.
You become supporters and cheerleaders for the other people in the group, which is really cool. In that group experience, you were able to walk your own individual path.
Right.
Because there's homework that you do each week. So you're reading a book, and the first thing we're teaching you is the definition of grief. So you're really learning the definition of grief. You're going home. Would you say it was about, I don't know, I usually say it's about 45 minutes of homework. Do you think it was more than that?
No, I definitely don't think so. I know for me it was just a little harder just because I have a busy week. Busy week. So I did, it did take me just a little, like a couple minutes each day.
Yeah.
But I did mine's were on Monday.
Yeah.
And so every Monday I would, like, by the time I
got there, you'd be all prepared.
Yeah.
Something happened to you, though, through the program. You decided that there was a lot of more work for you to do.
Yes.
I don't want to say a lot more work. You decided there was more work for you to do. There were
Correct.
some other things that you decided you wanted to grieve as well.
Correct.
And so then you reached out to me later, and you ended up doing that work one-on-one.
Yes.
And that was really eye-opening for you.
Yeah. There was a couple things that during the process of during the homework and just seeing different things throughout my childhood and growing up,
Yeah.
that I never knew that I was grieving, and I never knew that it was actually holding me back from really loving people the way that I really
Yeah.
should have. And so doing that, I definitely learned a different method of just loving people and
Right.
being there.
And letting go, right?
Yes.
Letting go of some of that past. It's really kind of funny because a lot of people think that they're going to go through grief recovery and they're going to do their work, and I have this magic wand and I'm going to make them forget their past. So, and it's so funny. They're like, well, I don't want to forget them. And I'm like, I'm not a magician.
Yeah.
But the truth is that you still have those memories. You know what happened, but
Right.
the pain associated with that or the loss associated with those memories are no longer there.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what happened for you. If you had to refer someone to grief recovery, what would you say? Tell our friends, what do you think, what would you tell them?
What would I tell them? Honestly, because I think I've told a couple friends already about it. I just told them just the healing itself, just feeling the weight off the shoulders, where it no longer hurts.
Yeah.
It just no longer hurts. Nothing that someone can say or do
Right.
brings up that hurt or brings up hatred or anything like that, or anger.
Yeah.
I know for me it was a lot of anger that someone would mention someone's name and I'd get angry.
Yeah.
Or someone would mention someone's name and I'd be like, ugh, I'd start crying. I know for a while, with I was grieving my grandpa a lot.
Yeah.
And for a long, long time, we couldn't, no one in my family could mention my grandpa because I would start crying.
Right.
And then, I think during during my grief, I was actually in Mexico and my aunt gave me an old pair of my grandpa's PJs. And normally, I would have been crying, and everyone's like, she's gonna cry, she's gonna cry, she's gonna cry. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna cry. This is happy. I'm happy. But it was but my family, they said that they were afraid of giving me the PJs because they knew I'd cry.
Yeah.
And so just even going and receiving the PJs of my grandpa, because I was extremely close to him. So receiving the PJs and not crying and getting super emotional about that, it was just I was happy and I was just yay, I have something to remember of mine personal of my grandpa versus crying about it.
That's so cool. I'm
Yeah.
the one crying now when you share that story because
Yeah.
I know what that means. What happens is that in grief recovery, fond memories return.
Yeah.
Grief recovery means we can go to the places that we went with our grandpa and we feel joyous.
Yeah.
We can talk about him.
Right.
I can talk about Austin now. I can talk about Donovan, and it's so cool, right? But prior to that, prior to grief recovery, every time the name would be mentioned, I would break down and start crying, or I didn't want to talk about it at all. It was like I had to totally avoid it. And so that doesn't mean that tears don't come, my friends, just because we're mentioning our loved one. But what it does mean is that the joy and the memory of them is just so cool. That, you know what? You're the second person this week that mentioned pajamas about a griever. That was so cool. I was with another client, and she said, I've got my mom's pajamas out, and she goes, and I didn't cry. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Just having those memories. I shared with a client of mine once that he couldn't drive past the hospital because every time he went past the hospital, he would start crying. And he called me 2 weeks ago, and he's like, I drove past the hospital and I didn't even realize it. So fond memories will return and really sad, hurtful memories go away. Don't you think that's what happened for you?
Definitely. I definitely do feel like I embrace my memories more now.
Yeah.
And I definitely the fun memories are constantly running through my head versus, because I know for me, I'm a lot of the bad memories were going through my head, and that was bringing me a lot of anger and a lot of like a lot of hurt and emotion. Versus now it's opposite. Like it's bringing me good memories, but I'm happy and I'm just like, yes, like I'm joyful and I'm just more in a, hey, like I love them, they love me, and this is what happened, you know? Versus, I don't know. I can't really explain it.
Yeah. But it's so different. Here's the other thing that I think is really cool that our friends will want to hear. You now have tools to use, and you know how to do the grief work. So if anything, things happen in our life, right? We get into fight with people. We have arguments with people. We will continue to have grief from death in our life, but you now have the tools to use from now until forever.
Yes.
That, I think, is the most important thing. You don't just walk away with the recovery from your broken heart, but you now have a tool that you can use for forever.
Right.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And now that you've learned it, you can use it even in a daily little simple walk, which I love about that.
Yeah.
What I love about you, Christy, is that you fell so in love with grief recovery that you and I are working on a plan to bring you on as our first grief recovery specialist when we launch our center, but teaching it in Spanish.
Yes.
And I think that's such a huge need, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't I know so many Latinos who are grieving.
Yes.
And I know in my culture, like we are taught, don't cry. You have to be macho and like all these things.
Right.
And so just even bringing like the tools from grief recovery.
Right.
And I know with certain family members, we can't talk about certain people that have passed because it brings anger or it brings hurt to them. And it's like, and those are the tools that I want to be able to like bring to not only my family, but to bring it to others as well.
Right. So let me ask you this. Is it like every person you meet, because this happened to me, I'm like, dude, you totally need grief recovery. Like, you know that it would help them.
Yes.
And you like start telling them about it because you're like, oh my gosh, it made such a difference in my life. That totally happened for me. Here's the thing about grief recovery, though, I think that is so important, is that you don't come to grief recovery until you're totally ready.
Right.
And that's what happened with you.
Yeah.
You were hearing the shows, you were relating to the shows, but then you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like me, that sounds like me. But when you were ready, you jumped in.
Exactly. And I think because I know you started about 12 years ago?
I started 12 years ago.
So my family have known you for 12 years.
Yeah.
And another family that's really dear to my heart as well, or to my family, the Washingtons, they kept telling me, you should do grief recovery, you should do grief recovery. And people around me were telling me, and I was getting angry because I'm like, dude, stop trying to fix me. And so I was getting angry because people kept telling me. But then once I started watching you and listening to you, I'm like, okay, like
there's something in
there.
there
Is something in there that would probably help me heal, because I was angry and I was emotional all the time. So I'm not as angry. I'm not as emotional now.
I'm glad I could help you and be a part of that.
Yeah.
So that's so true. That is a really great point that you brought up. We in society and our friends, and I always call them our supporting staff. Our supporting staff are all the people that are around us when we need help, right?
Yeah.
They try to fix us because they think we're broken.
Exactly.
But we're not broken. We're actually grieving.
Yes.
Grievers are not broken. They do not need to be fixed. My friends, you cannot fix them. They have to take this step by themselves. And taking that first step was amazing for you. And it was life-changing, right? And so you came in when you were ready, and that was so cool. I also want to point out this. We are laughing. We are joking. We're having a great time. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't deep what we went through.
Oh, no.
But because when we're recovered from our brokenness, we have this joy that comes back into us. And I think I shared with you in the first class that we had that I grieved every relationship in my life, and I just feel lighter.
Yes.
And you did a lot of grief work. You've done a ton of grief work.
Yeah.
Did you share how that feels for you?
It felt it felt amazing. Like during the process, it was very, very emotional. I think I called you like a dozen times during my homeworks and stuff like that. But during the like afterwards, it was just like literally you just picked up a brick off my shoulders.
Yes.
Or definitely like I don't feel like it doesn't feel heavy anymore.
Yeah. That's it. And
Yeah.
if you guys could experience that, it is amazing. It's like you're carrying around a backpack full of potatoes,
Yeah.
and then you leave them in the office with me, but you go on and your life is just lighter.
Yeah.
Christy, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for
course.
sharing with my friends. Thank you for being my first guest of my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming to Grief Recovery. Thank you for your willingness to share. And friends, look forward to our Spanish segment, which will be coming soon at the end of 2019.
Yes.
And we love that you're listening to us and you trust us. You can find us at healingstartswiththeheart.com. My name is Sharon Brubaker. You can also find me at sharonbrubaker.com. My phone number is 661-212-0720. Reach out anytime. Thank you, friends, for joining us for this segment. Have a great day.